Welcome to Space Drift, please subscribe. In global economics, few tools are as direct or as controversial as a tariff. A tariff is a tax on imported goods designed to make foreign products more expensive and encourage consumers to buy American-made alternatives. For decades, tariffs have been a powerful lever in the hands of policymakers, shaping the flow of goods and the fortunes of industries. But they have also sparked fierce debate, both at home and abroad, about their true costs and benefits. Traditionally, Congress has controlled tariffs with careful debate and oversight. Lawmakers would weigh the economic impact, consult with experts, and consider the interests of American workers and businesses before making any changes. But in early 2025, President Trump upended this process, announcing a sweeping 10% tariff on nearly all imports, bypassing Congress entirely and taking the nation by surprise. This move sent shockwaves through global supply chains, rattling markets and businesses worldwide. It marked a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy, with immediate and far-reaching consequences for both American consumers and international partners. The president argued it was time to put America first and confront decades of what he called unfair trade. Supporters cheered the bold stance, while critics warned of retaliation and higher prices. But this bold action immediately raised profound legal and constitutional questions. Can a president unilaterally impose such a broad tax on imports? Or is this an overreach into Congress's authority, challenging the very foundation of American governance? The answers would be decided not in economic forums, but in U.S. courtrooms, where the stakes for the nation's future could not be higher. This is the story of a legal battle that could redefine the balance of power in Washington and reshape America's role in the global economy for years to come. President Trump's tariffs weren't backed by new legislation. Instead, he invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, a law from 1977 meant for national emergencies, not routine trade disputes. Historically, IEEPA was used to sanction hostile nations or freeze terrorist assets, not to overhaul U.S. trade policy. The administration declared the persistent U.S. trade deficit, declining manufacturing, and illicit drug flows as a national emergency. This allowed sweeping action, a 10% baseline tariff on nearly all imports, plus steep targeted tariffs on countries like Brazil, China, and Mexico. Critics argued Congress never intended IEEPA to let a president rewrite the tariff code. The law doesn't even mention tariffs, making its use here highly controversial. By framing a long-term economic trend as an emergency, the president claimed unprecedented power over trade. This aggressive move set the stage for a historic legal showdown. At its core, can a president use emergency powers to reshape the entire U.S. economy? The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to set tariffs and regulate commerce. This foundational principle was designed to prevent any single branch from wielding too much influence over the nation's economic fate, ensuring a careful balance of power. For over 2 centuries, this separation of powers has ensured major economic decisions are made through debate and public accountability. Lawmakers argue, negotiate, and ultimately vote, with their actions visible to the public and subject to scrutiny. This process is meant to reflect the will of the people and protect against rash or unchecked decisions. President Trump's unilateral tariffs bypass this process, transforming a congressional power into an executive decree. By invoking emergency powers, he sidestepped the traditional legislative route, raising questions about the limits of presidential authority. A coalition of businesses and states sued, arguing IEEPA can't override Congress's explicit authority. They contended that the president's actions threaten the constitutional order and undermine the checks and balances that define American democracy. Congress never meant for a president to declare a trade deficit an emergency and rewrite the tariff schedule. They argued that such sweeping changes should only come from Congress, after open debate and careful consideration. Presidents get leeway in foreign policy, but taxing and trade are core congressional powers. Allowing the president to act alone could set a dangerous precedent, blurring the lines between branches of government. If the president can use emergency powers to impose broad tariffs, what's left of Congress's role? The very process that ensures transparency and accountability could be eroded, shifting power away from the people's representatives. The outcome could set a precedent for how far executive authority can reach. The Supreme Court's decision will not only affect trade policy, but could also redefine the boundaries of power for generations. The very structure of American government, the balance between Congress and the president, and the future of democratic oversight hang in the balance. The legal fight began in the U.S. Court of International Trade, a specialized federal court in New York City that handles complex disputes over international trade and customs law. In a closely watched decision, the court ruled President Trump had exceeded his authority under IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and ordered the tariffs nullified. The administration, determined to defend its actions, quickly appealed the ruling, and the Federal Circuit put the lower court's decision on hold, so the tariffs stayed in effect for the time being, fueling months of uncertainty for businesses, importers, and everyday consumers who faced higher prices and shifting supply chains. During appeals, judges pressed both sides, questioning whether Congress ever meant to delegate such sweeping power to the president without making it explicit in the law. The skepticism was clear. IEEPA doesn't mention tariffs at all, yet the administration argued it authorized a new trade regime, claiming broad emergency powers in the name of national security. Both sides, now deeply entrenched, prepared for a final showdown at the Supreme Court, knowing the stakes had grown far beyond a single trade dispute. At issue are fundamental constitutional questions about the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. The economic stakes are enormous, with billions of dollars in trade and countless jobs hanging in the balance, and the legal precedent set here will reach far beyond these tariffs, potentially affecting future presidents and global commerce. With a decision from the appeals court expected soon, legal experts and the public alike are watching closely, as the Supreme Court could take up the case as early as October, setting the stage for a landmark ruling. The outcome will shape the future of executive power, congressional oversight, and U.S. trade policy for years to come. For now, the nation waits, as the highest court in the land prepares to weigh in on a case that could alter the balance of power in Washington. The next chapter could redefine the limits of presidential authority and reshape the landscape of American law and trade. This case is about more than tariffs. It's about the limits of presidential power. If the Supreme Court sides with the administration, it could set a precedent allowing presidents to use emergency declarations to bypass Congress on major economic issues. Challengers argue the major questions doctrine applies. Only Congress can authorize sweeping changes to trade law. The administration counters that foreign trade is a core executive function, requiring flexibility in emergencies. The court must balance executive power in foreign affairs against Congress's constitutional control over taxes and commerce. The ruling will shape not just this presidency, but the boundaries of executive authority for generations. A decision against the president would reaffirm Congress's role. A decision in his favor could permanently shift the balance of power. The stakes couldn't be higher for American democracy. How the legal battle rages, Americans are already feeling the tariffs' impact. Prices on everyday goods, from electronics to groceries, have risen as importers pass the 10% tax down the supply chain. Inflation has ticked up, and job growth has slowed, with businesses facing higher costs and uncertainty. Companies reliant on global supply chains scramble to adapt, sometimes delaying investments or cutting jobs. The legal limbo makes long-term planning nearly impossible, discouraging risk-taking and innovation. Financial markets dislike uncertainty, and the ongoing court fight clouds the economic outlook. Will the tariffs be struck down? Will companies get refunds? No one knows, making it hard to invest or hire. The longer the uncertainty drags on, the more it weighs on growth. For many, the real cost of the tariffs is not just higher prices, but a climate of doubt that stifles the economy. The stakes are personal, affecting wallets and livelihoods nationwide. For American importers, the tariff fight is a costly waiting game. Companies pay the 10% duty to keep goods flowing, but a court has already called the policy illegal. They track every dollar paid, hoping for refunds if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs. But the refund process would be slow and complex, adding more uncertainty. Business planning is paralyzed. Should they sign new contracts, invest, or wait? The legal limbo discourages long-term investment and risk-taking, key drivers of growth. Companies crave stability, but the whiplash of court rulings has left them in suspense. Everyone is waiting for a final Supreme Court decision to bring clarity. The verdict will shape not just profits but the future of American commerce. As the Supreme Court prepares to rule, the nation faces a turning point. A decision for the president could make emergency declarations a standard tool for sweeping economic policy, changing the balance between Congress and the White House. A ruling against the tariffs would reassert congressional authority and restore the traditional legislative process for trade. For consumers and workers, the outcome will affect prices, jobs, and economic stability. The case is a defining moment for American government, testing the limits of presidential power in the 21st century. How much authority should one person have to shape the economy? Where is the line between emergency action and overreach? The Supreme Court's answer will set the rules for decades to come. This landmark case will shape not just trade, but the very structure of American democracy.